component and state. Let's recap. In the previous session, we understood about class component. We also have seen about how to handle events in React. Then we understood about state, and we have seen about how to update the state using the setState method. Coming to today's session, in today's session, we are going to build a searchable user list application. In the previous session, we built a user list application, right? We are going to add a search feature to it, and also we are going to add a delete feature. We also are going to cover about the object syntax related to the setState method. Then we'll see about how to pass function as a prop to the components. Okay, so to set the code playground for today's session, you need to run this command. So then run npm install. With this, all the dependencies will get installed. So let's start building a searchable user list application. So there you can see on the right, so we have a search bar. So based on what the user has searched, right, the list of users displayed below should be appropriately updated. Okay, there you can see, right? So based on what we have entered, the user list should be updated. At the same time, we also want to add the delete feature. So when we click on that delete icon, so appropriately the user should be removed from the users list. Okay, so these are the two features that we want to add. So the initial code snippet is already available for you. Okay, so if you run npm start in the terminal, you'll be able to see this output. Okay, so this is the application that we have built in the previous session. Okay, that's that. Okay, so now for this, we want to add two features. One is the search feature, another one is the delete feature, right? So let's focus on the search feature first. Okay, so for this, let's understand the steps involved. So the first step is obviously adding an input element where the user can search, where the user can type. Right? So the first thing is that. So based on what the user has entered, we have to appropriately filter the user list below, right? And then we have to display the filtered user list. Okay, so these are the steps involved. Firstly, adding the search bar, okay, the input element. Next, filtering the user list based on the search input, and then appropriately displaying the filtered user list. Okay, so firstly, let's do the first step, that is adding the input element. So there you can see we have input and the type is search. Okay, so with this, the input element will get added. Okay, so let's do this. So this is the code playground. I have already set it for today's session. So here, you can find the code snippet already available. Okay, so here we have user profile, and then we'll go to app.js. So there you can see we have app.js. So there's already a user list present. So here we are rendering. So we have the user list, and there's a list container within which we are displaying the user profiles. And the user profile component is present in the user profile directly here in the index.js. So we have the user profile. You're already familiar with this code, right? So let's not go into details of that. So now here in the app.js, so firstly we have a container. So then we have a heading, the user list, and below the heading, we want to add a search bar. Okay, that is an input element. So let's do that. So we are done adding that. So next we have to specify the type equal to search, right? We already have seen about this in the HTML. So input with the type equal to search. So we are done specifying that. Okay. So now let's have a look at the output. So for that you need to run npm start. So with this, the server will get started. So let's have a look at the output. So for that, localhost :3000. So with this, you can see the output here, right? And on the top, you can see we have a search bar where we can enter the values, right? In this manner. Okay. So we are done adding the input element, and we were able to see the output also, right? So now, based on what the user has entered in the search bar, so we have to appropriately update the user list and do all of these, right? So here, one important point to note is the search input will change over the time, right? So whatever we type will change over the time. We can change it, we can add some else, we can remove it, or we can do all of these things. So the search input will change over the time. And the things that change over the time should be maintained in the state object, right? So here, based on the search input, our UI will be updated, and this search input will change over the time. So that's the reason we are going to maintain that in the state object. So if the value will change over the time, and appropriately based on that, if the UI has to be updated, so then we'll maintain such things in the state object. So here, based on the search input, so the UI has to be updated and the search input will change over the time. So that's the reason we have to maintain that in the state object. So there you can see in the state object, we added a key search input, and the initial value is an empty string, so colon and empty string. Okay, so double quotes. Clear? So we are maintaining the search input in the state object. Okay, so right now we have just mentioned the initial value, and over the time with the change in the search input, the state object has to be appropriately updated. So for that, we need an event listener, right? So for that input element, we'll add an event listener on change. For that, we are adding an event listener on change search input. Okay. So there you can see we added this event listener, event handler function. So this is an arrow function to which the event object is passed as an argument. Okay, so here the event is an object which will have information about the particular event. So like in our case, we want to access the search input, right? What the user has entered in the search bar. So we can access this with the help of the event object by writing event.target.value. Okay, so event.target.value will give us the search input. Okay, in this way we can access the text entered by the user in the search bar. Okay, so now let's try this out. So here in the app class component, so let's add a state object, state equal to, so here the key is search input. Okay, so initially it's empty string, so we have initialized with this. Okay, so now we have added the state object, so with the search input as the key. So over the time when the search input changes, so we have to appropriately update the state object. So for that, let's add an event listener for the input. So on change equal to, so here you can see the C is capital, on change equal to, and we have to provide the event listener, right? So for that, so as we understood, we have to write this dot and we have to provide the method. So let's say on change search input. Okay, so let's add an event handler function, so corresponding to this. So this would be an arrow function. So generally we have this event listeners as arrow functions. So for this, the event object will be passed as an argument. Okay, so using this event object, we can access the various details related to the event. Like in our case, we want to access the search input. So we can do that using console.log of event.target.value. So event.target.value will give us the search input that we have entered. Okay, so let's save it. So here you can see that in the state object, we have the search input. We are maintaining the search input. So and over the time, so when the search input changes, so for that we added an event listener. So in this, we are printing the event.target.value, which is a search input. Later on, we'll update the state also. So let's have a look at the output till here. Okay. So here, let me open the console. So inspect console. So here, now let's say I'm typing ES. Okay, so here you can see whatever I'm typing, I'm able to see that here in the console log, right? So since whatever I'm typing, so appropriately what's happening, so the on change event is getting triggered. So then the method is the event handler is being called. So there using event.target.value, we are displaying that. So that's the reason we are able to see this. Okay, similarly here I'm removing, let's say J like this. Okay, clear? So we understood this, right? So here, let's understand what exactly is happening, right? So here, this UI is being rendered, right? So whenever we are searching, okay, so this event will get triggered. So on change. So then this on change search input event handler will be called. So to which the event is being passed. So using event.target.value, so we are able to display the search input that we are entering. Okay, clear? So we are done till here, right? The next thing is, so we have to update the state object based on the search input, right? So the search input is varying. So based on that, appropriately the state object has to be updated. So for that, we'll make use of the set state method. Whenever you want to update the state, so we have to make use of the set state method. So this dot set state off. So now, what do we have to write in the set state method? So let's understand that. Okay, so as we understood, when it comes to set state method, we can either pass a function, a callback function, or an object as the arguments. Okay, so here in our case, so generally here we'll use the object. So we make use of the function when the state updation depends on the previous state. But in case if the state updation is independent of the previous state, then we can directly make use of the object syntax of the set state method. That is directly passing the updated state object. There's no need of a callback function. Okay, clear? So we generally make use of the callback function when the state updation depends on the previous state. Like in the case of the counter application, right? So the count has to be updated based on the previous state count, right? So then we'll make use of the callback function. Whereas if the state updation is independent of the previous state, then we can directly make use of the object syntax. That is, we'll directly pass the updated state object. Okay. So here in our case, so we have to update the search input. So the search input doesn't depend on the previous state, right? So directly what is the current value, we can access that and we can update it, right? So here we can make use of the object syntax. So you understood the difference, right? We make use of the callback when the updation depends on the previous state. If the updation is independent of the previous state, then we'll make use of the object syntax. So in our case, so there you can see we are directly passing the updated state object, where for the search input, the corresponding value is event.target.value, right? So with that, we are updating the state object. Okay, clear? So let's try this out. So here, now, here we want to update the state object. So this dot set state. So to update, we'll make use of the set state method. So for this, we can directly make use of the object syntax. So we'll be passing the updated state object. Okay, so in which the search input is the key and the corresponding value is event.target.value. Okay, so this is the corresponding value. So we have specified that. Okay, so we are done with this step. Okay. So we have updated the state object. So the next thing is, so based on the state object, so the UI has to be rendered, right? So now in the render method, let's access the search input. Okay, so the search input is waiting. So whenever, so the search input is waiting. So whenever the search input is changing, we have updated the state. So now when we are updating the state using the set state method, the render method will get called. Now the UI has to be appropriately updated, right? So for now, let's access the search input first in the render method. Okay, so there you can see this dot state. So using that, we are accessing the search input, and when we are displaying, so there you can see the output, right? So now we understood that we are updating the state object, so using the set state method, so the render method will be called. So in the render method, we'll have this updated search input value. Okay, so let's try this out. So here in the render method, so let's access the search input. So how do we do it? From this dot state, using the object destruction, we can access it. Okay, so constant. So here the key is search input, so we are providing that. So using this, we can actually use a search input, right? And then next we'll display the search input also. Okay. Cool. So now let's have a look at the output. So let's inspect. Let's have a look at the console. So now let me clear this. Okay. So now here, let's say S. So whatever I'm typing, so I'm able to see the output, right? In this manner. Clear? So we are able to appropriately access the search input in the render method, right? So that's what we understood. So here, let's understand the flow that's happening. Okay, so firstly in the input element, so once we change the text that we are entering, right, so the on value change event will get triggered. So the corresponding event handler function, which is on change, will get called. So in the on change, we are updating the state object. Okay, so the set state method is being called. With this, the state object is being updated, and it will indirectly call the render method. Okay, then it will in turn call the render method, and in the render method will update the UI, right? So this is the cycle that's happening. So right now, since we aren't making any changes to the UI, so the UI is as it is, but this is the flow. So input element, the on value change event gets triggered. So the corresponding event handler is called, where we are calling the set state method. So the state object is updated, and the render method is called, and the render method will update the UI. Okay, clear? So here, there is one best practice that we need to follow. So we are accessing the search input, right? So the search input that we are accessing in the render method, we have to update that in the input element as value. Okay, so value equal to search input. So this is actually a best practice to do. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you have to do it always. We'll later on understand when we have to do it and when we shouldn't, right? You just need to know that it's a best practice that to access the search input and update that as a value for the input element. Okay, so let's do this. So here we have accessed the search input, and appropriately we'll update the value here. So value equal to, so which is search input. Okay, so we have updated here. Okay, so this step is done. Okay, so with this we can see this output we have already seen, right? Okay, so adding the input element is done, right? So the next thing is, so based on the input text, so we have to filter the user list based below, right? So there is a list of users below. We have to filter them based on the input value in the search bar, right? And also we have to filter them and then display them also. We have to display the filtered user list. So let's do these steps. Okay, so there you can see, firstly, we have to filter the user details list based on the search input, right? So for that, we'll make use of the filter method. So user details list dot filter. So to this, we are going to pass a callback function. So to the callback function, each user in the list will be passed as an argument. Now, coming to what we have to write in this user. Okay, so in the name, we have to check whether the search input is present or not. So based on that, we have to filter. So for that, let's make use of the includes method. So each user.name.includes of search input. So the includes method will look for the search input in the name variable. Okay, so if the search input is present, then it will return true. If it is not present, then it will return false. Okay, so whichever users will return true, then they will be added to the search results, right? That's the filter method, which we already know, right? Each user will be passed as an argument to the callback function. Then we are checking whether the search input is present in the name or not. So if it is present, we are returning, it will return true. So appropriately, those users which have the search input will be filtered and will be present in the search results. Okay, clear? So now, after we get the search results, so appropriately we have to display the users based on the search results, right? Previously, we were iterating over all the users present in the user details list and we were displaying, right? But here we have to display based on the search results, right? So we are just updating that there, okay? Instead of user details list, so we have specifying the search results. So with this, you'll be able to see an output in this manner. Okay, there you can see. So based on what we are typing, so appropriately the user list will get updated. So J we have written, so Jacob has come. Okay, similarly, you can type another thing, say DE, and then as you can see, we have Devon in this manner. Okay, let's try this out. Okay, so here, based on the search input, we have to update the user details list, right? So here what we are doing, using the entire user detail list, we are displaying the list of users, right? Whereas we have to filter these user details list. Okay, so let's do that step. Okay, so based on the search input that we have, okay, so we want some list of users based on the search, right? So search users equal to, so user details list, filter, we want to filter from that. So let's have the callback function to which each user will get passed. Okay, and then within this, we only want to filter the ones which have this search input, right? So for that, each user dot name dot includes of, and we'll provide the appropriate search input. So what will the includes do? It will check whether the search input, this string, is present in the name variable or not. So if it is present, it will return true. So based on that, we are filtering the users. Okay, with this we'll get the search users. Okay, now based on the list of users that we got, based on the search results, you can call this as search results. So based on the search results that we got, so we have to update the list of users being displayed. So here we are displaying all the users, that is all the users present in the users details list. Instead, we have to replace this with the search results. So with this, only the users present in the search results will be displayed. So displaying the filtered thing is also done, right? There you can see it's compiled successfully. Now let's go here and let's start typing. Okay, so let's here we write Esther, and there you can see it has been updated, and then say Floyd, and there you can see, let's say Devon, and there you can see, right? Clear? Okay. So we are done with building the search feature for this user list application, right? So we firstly added an input element. Okay, so then as this search input is varying, and appropriately we have to update the UI based on that. So we are maintaining that in the state object. Okay, next, so we have to filter the users based on the search input. So for that, using the search input in the state object, so we are filtering the user details list, and we are appropriately rendering the user details list based on the filtered users. Okay, so with this, there you can see the output. Okay, so adding the search feature is done. Next, now let's add the delete functionality to this application. Okay, so there you can see there is a cross icon. By clicking on this, we have to delete that user from the list of users is being updated right over the time. So when the user clicks on the into button, the delete button, so appropriately the user has to be removed from the users list. So over the time, the users list is being updated, right? So then what do we have to do? We have to maintain the users list in the state, right? So the first step is maintaining the users list in the state. The next thing is we'll add a delete button, so using which the user can interact and delete a particular user. And then we have to add the delete button functionality, right? So these are the steps involved. So let's step by step do them. Okay, so first step is maintaining the users list in the state. So now in the state object, in the app component, we have a state object where we were previously maintaining the search input. We'll add another key, which is user details list, which will be used to maintain the list of users. Okay, we'll maintain that here. Okay, and whenever a delete occurs, right, we'll update this user details list in the state object. Okay, clear? So let's do this step. So as we understood, here in the app component, we want to maintain the user details list. So let's add that user details list. And then the corresponding value is the user details list that we have. This is the initial user details list, right? We are maintaining that here. Okay. So here there is one best practice that we need to follow, right? So the user details list that we have, the list of users with the objects or user details objects. So that is actually the initial data. So here the initial data and the key in the state object, they are the same, right? There you can see they are just the same. So we shouldn't have this in this manner. Okay, we should clearly maintain a distinction between the initial user data and the key present in the state object. So for that, let's update this as initial user details list. Okay, this is the initial data, right? That list with all these objects. So that is the initial data. So let's name that as initial user details list. And in the state object, the key will be user details list. And appropriately, we are going to update that as initial user details list. User details list : initial user details list. Okay, so now let's do these steps. So as we understood, we have to maintain a clear distinction between the initial data and the key present in the state object. So let's call this initial user details list, and then we'll update here in the state object as the initial user details list. Okay, clear? Now, So we are done with these steps. Okay. Next, we want to access the user details list in the render method, right? Appropriately, we have to update the UI based on the user details list. So let's access this from the state object. So there you can see in the render method, using the object instruction, we are accessing the user details list. Okay, let's do this. So from the user details list present in the state object, we have to access this, we have to render the entire UI, right? So that's the reason we have to access this from the state object, and then you can see appropriately. Okay, clear? So we are done with these steps, right? Okay, so here we are done maintaining the users list in the state object, and then appropriately based on the users list present in the state, we are rendering the UI. The next step is adding the delete button and adding the corresponding functionality for the delete button. So let's do these steps. Okay, so firstly, to add the delete button, you need to add this JSX element code, right? So there you can see we have the button element. Here we have to specify the type as button. So that's suggestible, like we previously have seen about type equal to submit, like this, right? So similarly here also we have to write type equal to button. This is a best practice which the React app will, the Create React app will enforce. So for the button, it's always suggestible to use type equal to button. Okay, and then coming to the styling of it, we have the class name as delete button. So within that, we are adding an image. So the source, the URL, and then the alt text is cross, and the corresponding class name is delete image. So with this, this entire thing is being added in the user profile. You need to observe that. So for each user profile, we need the delete icon, right? So we are adding this in the user profile, and with this, we are getting delete icon for all the user profiles. Okay, so let's do this. So now let's add the delete icon. So the delete icon should be present for each and every user profile. It is specific to the user profile. So where do we have to add? In the user profile component, right? So here we have the index.js where we have the user profile. So after this, we want the delete icon. So firstly, that's a button. Okay, so as we understood, the type should be specified as button. And then there's a little bit styling that we need to apply. So the class name is delete-button. So this styling is already available for you in the index.css. So now let's add a delete icon here. So image, the source will provide the URL here, and then the alt text is cross. And then coming to the styling, which is class name equal to delete-image. Okay. So here now let's provide the URL also. The URL is available here in the resources.md file. So all the assets that are necessary will be available for you in the resources.md file. So here I'm specifying the URL. So with this, I'm done adding the delete icon. Let's have a look at the output. So there you can see for each and every user profile, we have the delete icon here. Okay, clear? So we are done adding the delete button. So the next thing is we have to add the functionality for this, right? So for that, firstly, let's add an event listener on delete, right? And we'll specify that here for the button. So on click equal to on delete. Okay. So with this, the on delete method will be specified as the event handler for the delete button. Okay. So now let's do these steps. So firstly, let's add an event listener on delete equal to, it's an arrow function. So generally we use our arrow functions for event listeners. So now let's specify this method as an event listener for the button. So on click is the event type. So and then we'll specify this method. Okay, clear? So now we are done with adding the event listener, right? So here in the on delete, right? So in the arrow function, what do we have to do? Let's understand that first. Okay, so here whenever the delete icon is clicked, so we have to appropriately update the user list, right? So the user list should be updated, the user details list should be updated. Whereas when it comes to the user profile, we only have access to the user details of a particular user. Okay, we don't have the entire user details list available here in the user profile component, right? We only have the details specific to a single user. Okay, whereas when we are clicking on the delete icon, we have to update the user details list, which is present in the app component. So user details list is present in the app component, and we want to update the user details list present in the app component. So the delete function has to be written in the app.js file. Okay, whereas the event handler is present in the index.js file, right? In the user profile component, in the user profile / index.js file, right? So now, how do we do this? Okay, the delete function should be present in app.js, whereas the event handler is present in the user profile component, right? So here what we can do is, so from the app.js, we can pass the function as a prop to the user profile component. Okay, so we can pass the functions as props to the child components. So here we can pass the delete function, which is present in app.js, as a prop to the user profile component. Okay, so let's do that. So here in the app.js, we have written a delete user function. Later on, we'll add the functionality. So this is the delete user. And now we have to pass that as a prop to the user profile component. So there you can see delete user equal to this dot delete user. So with this, the delete user function present in app.js will be passed as a prop to the user profile component. And when it comes to the user profile component, we can access the delete user, and appropriately in the event handler, we can call the delete user. Okay, so in this way, we can handle the scenario. Okay, let's try this out. So as we understood, so here when it comes to the on delete, so what do we have to write? That was a question, right? So in the on delete, we have to update the user details list. Where is the user details list present? It is present here, right, in the app component. So the delete function will be present in the app component, right? So the on delete, let's say delete user, let's call that as delete user. So this delete user functionality will be present in the app.component, right? So this delete user is present here, whereas we have to call this from the user profile component, right? So what do we have to do for that? We have to pass this function as a prop to the user profile component. Okay, so how can we do that? Just like how we pass the prop. Okay, so here delete user is the prop name, and the corresponding value is the function. So this dot delete user. Okay, clear? So here let's add a small console log statement. Let's say delete user method trigger. Okay, so with this you can see that the delete user has been passed as a prop to the user profile component. There you can see. Now in the user profile component, so from the prop we can access the, so from the props we can access the delete user method. Okay, so with this we got the delete user method, and then we can call this method from the event handler. Okay, so you understood the flow, right? So here the on delete, the event handler is present in the user profile component, whereas the delete user method has to be present in the app.js. So we have passed the function as a prop, and then we are triggering the function here in the event handler. Okay, clear? So now let's try to view this output. Let me do an inspect since we added a console log statement. Let's open the console, right? So here, now coming to, let's say I'm clicking on the delete icon here. So there you can see delete user method triggered. So similarly, let's click another one. So there you can see again it got triggered in this manner. Okay, clear? So this step is also done. Okay, now let's proceed further. There you can see we have this output, right? So the next thing is we have to appropriately update the user details list. That is, we have to delete the user from the user details list. So to identify the user that needs to be deleted, we'll pass the unique number. So in the user details, in the user profile component, we have the user details, and within the user details, we have the unique number. So using this unique number, we can appropriately update the user details list. So let's pass the unique number to the delete user method, and then using this unique number, we will update the user details list. Okay, so here in the delete user, we are just adding a console log statement for now by displaying the unique number. Okay, so we are passing this unique number so that we can identify the user that needs to be deleted, and appropriately we can update the user details list. Okay, so let's try this out. So to identify the user that needs to be deleted, so we'll pass the unique number. So we can access the unique number using the user details list. So unique number, so that we are going to pass as an argument to the delete user. And coming to the delete user method, so here in the delete user, so we'll get the unique number as an argument. So unique number, and then let's display that. Okay, so in the console log statement, unique number colon, and then let's specify the unique number. Okay, clear? So the unique number will be passed as a parameter, and then appropriately we are displaying that. Okay, so let's have a look at the output. Let's save this also. Okay, so now I'm inspecting. So and then let's have a look at the console. Okay, let me clear this first. So there you can see I'm clicking this. So the unique number, the first user, for this the unique number is 1, so that has to be deleted appropriately. And then let's say I'm clicking on this, so there you can see unique number is 3 in this manner. Okay. So using the unique number, we can appropriately identify the user that needs to be deleted from the user details list. Okay. So the next step is, there you can see we have seen this output. So the next step is we have to delete the user from the user details list. So for that, from the state object, first we'll access the user details list. Okay, and then we'll filter the user data. Appropriately, we'll get the user that needs to be, the users that have to be present. Okay, so from the user details list, we are filtering the user who doesn't have this unique number. Okay, so we'll get all the users else that don't have this unique number. So except the user with that unique number, we'll get the remaining users, right? And then we are going to appropriately update the state object. So once we update the state object, appropriately the render method will be called, and then the UI will get updated. right? Okay, let's have a look at this. So now we understood about this unique number, right? So from using the unique number, we have to appropriately update the user details list present in the state object. Okay, so for that, firstly, let's access the user details list. So constant user details list. So we want to get that from the state object. So this dot state. Okay, we got the user details list. Now we have to filter this. So we have to just remove the user with that unique number. Okay, we'll make use of the filter method. So user details list dot filter off, and then here the each user will be passed as an argument, and then we want to get all the users except the one with this unique number. Okay, so for that, so we'll just write it as each user dot unique number is not equal to the unique number that we have passed. Okay, so you understood each user will be passed as an argument, and the each user dot unique number should not be equal to the unique number that has been passed as an argument. So we'll get all the users except the one which has this unique number. So we are getting them as a result. So let's just call that as constant filtered user details list. So we are storing that here. So based on this, so the UI should be rendered. So if we update the state object, that would be sufficient. So this dot set state. So to update the state object, we make use of the set state method. So here, it's not dependent on the previous state, right? So just we already have the filtered user details list. We just have to provide that. So we can make use of the object syntax. So user details list will be equal to the filtered user details list. Okay. So with this, appropriately, the state object will be updated, and once the state object is updated, the render method will be called, and with the updated user details list, so we are going to get the list of users here. Okay, we are going to render them. Clear? Now, let's try this out. So here you can see we have a list of users. So now let's press into, so there you can see that user is no more. So let's again click here, so there you can see the user has been deleted. Okay, there you can see. So we are done with adding the delete functionality, and we were able to see this output, right? So where by clicking on the delete icon, appropriately the users have been removed from the user list. Okay, clear? So let's understand the flow that's happening here. Okay, so in the app component, so we have the user details list maintained in the state object, and then we have passed the user details and the delete user method as props to the user profile component, and the user profile component will appropriately render that component, right? And in case if the user has clicked on the delete icon, then the delete user method present in the app component has been triggered, to which we have passed the unique number of that component. So then appropriately the user detail list has been updated, and then the user profile will be rendered. Okay, so this is the flow that's happening. Okay, clear? Now let's summarize today's session. So we have built a searchable user list, to which we have added the search feature and also the delete feature. We also understood about the object syntax related to the set state method. Then we understood about how to pass functions as